Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. You're not looking at a frozen screen of us sitting here silently. Just going to give people a few minutes to finish connecting and logging on, and then we'll get started. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We appreciate your attendance at the Great Decisions Speaker Series. Today, we're going to be talking about global famine. Want to start by reminding everyone and thanking our sponsors. The Great Decisions Speaker Series is sponsored by the World Affairs Council of St. Louis, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization that connects the citizens of the St. Louis metro region to the world. It was founded in 1948 with a mission to offer programs that promote understanding, engagement, relationships, and leadership in world affairs. The World Affairs Council relies on donations from the community, and there are annual memberships available. You can learn more about becoming a member at the links in the chat box. We would also like to thank co-sponsors UMSL Global, the Office of Global Affairs at the University of Missouri in St. Louis. My name is Stephen Bagwell, and I'm an assistant professor of political science at the University of Missouri St. Louis, and I am your host. Today we have with us Dr. Patricia Wolf, who is the founder and executive director of Med and Food for Kids, which she founded in 2003 after witnessing years of needless suffering and the deaths of kids ravaged by malnutrition. She introduced ready-to-use therapeutic foods to Haiti, which was then a revolutionary new idea. The organization as a whole continues to operate in that space and with that primary focus. And so I will happily turn it over to Dr. Wolf now. Thank you, Dr. Wolf, for being here, and looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Dr. Bagwell, for that nice introduction. And thank you to the World Affairs Council of St. Louis and the University of Missouri St. Louis Global Great Decisions Partnership for inviting me to speak today with you about famine. Famine, regardless of what caused it, is heartbreaking. For we who have the privilege of living in an affluent country, we may see poverty and hunger, but we don't see famine except at a distance. Famine leads to malnutrition. Malnutrition leads to death. I have 35 years of experience in malnutrition as a volunteer pediatrician in Haiti. Let me tell you about Alexon, a 7-year-old who showed up at a partner clinic in Haiti. He weighed 29 pounds. Let that sink in. A 7-year-old who weighs 29 pounds, approximately the weight of your carry-on. So you can imagine his condition. He was too weak to walk. He was too weak to even sit up. He was starving in the late stages of malnutrition. He was a victim of persistent poverty without a famine, but in another place and time, a famine victim would look just like Alexon. We'll return to Alexon later. Famine is the starvation of large numbers of people. Natural disasters such as a drought or a flood may create immediate hunger, but just hunger can be ameliorated by rapid humanitarian assistance. That is, unless leaders are inept or they block or delay humanitarian assistance. Politics can turn hunger into terrible famines. Politicians make choices about who lives and who dies. They can weaponize food, for example, when leaders decide to dispose of populations they see as enemies. And the responses from other countries oftentimes are governed by the political needs in one's own country and not by empathy for the starving people. The UN and humanitarian worlds have focused on gathering data early and often and presenting this to governments in the hope of moving those governments to country action, or at the very least, having those governments invite in humanitarians as soon as possible to save lives. In contrast to famine, Malnutrition is person by person. It's a lack of food for an individual who may even be surrounded by others who are thriving. And of course, malnutrition is also the individual outcome of a massive famine. We define someone as malnourished when they have a very low weight for their height. Malnutrition causes immune deficiency, abnormal organ function, and a high likelihood that the person might die of an infectious disease before starvation causes their death. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the most basic are water, food, shelter, then safety, belonging, and love. The pyramid rises up to include esteem, cognitive rewards, aesthetic gratification, self-actualization, and transcendence. My family, like many of you attending this talk, is situated towards the top of this pyramid, but much of the world is at the very bottom, where people cling to life and sometimes find they cannot hold on. In my experience in this world, there are people who are suffering, and there are people who have contributed to their suffering. And then there are the helpers, to use Mr. Rogers' term. Among the helpers are technical people who collect data, identify problems, and prescribe solutions. And there are implementers who voluntarily put themselves in harm's way to help others who are involuntarily in harm's way. All humans are flawed. We all make mistakes. We have episodes of incompetence, but in history, famine has often been driven intentionally. When food becomes a weapon, we should call it what it is, evil. Long before I founded Meds and Food for Kids in 2003, I had been a pediatric volunteer in medical clinics in Haiti for almost 15 years. One day I was flying to Nepal and I happened to sit next to the head of Save the Children for Asia. I told him I wanted to take an entire year off my practice and work in pediatrics in the developing world. I was idealistic and looking for clarity about the nature of humans and the world and suffering, describing my goals in those terms. The gentleman told me I would be disappointed if I worked in a big organization like the World Health Organization or UNICEF or the World Food Program or even Save the Children. He said I should sign up with a small organization like a church-supported effort. More about that later. It was 1999, so I asked him about the famine in Ethiopia in 1985. I had seen so many unforgettable photos of skeletal children with flies in their eyes on TV. Some of you may remember that the singer Bob Geldof created Do They Even Know It's Christmas for a Live Aid concert on the BBC. This was viewed by 1.5 billion people and collected 140 million for famine relief. Then Michael Jackson and his colleagues wrote We Are the World, then the fastest selling single ever, and raised 63 million more for Ethiopians. The man on the airplane said that the Ethiopian famine was almost completely man-made, that starvation was used as an instrument of war against rebellious people, while food rotted in the ports because the government would not release it. The BBC never mentioned this. I don't know about you, but this shocked me to my core. It was the first time I considered famine man-made and the news media as a filter for governments. So let's look at a few of the famines of the last 250 years. Bengal, India, 1768 to 69. There was a poor harvest of rice that could have been managed had it not coincided with a smallpox epidemic and an occupying army. The real problem was that the East India Company's armies requisitioned all available crops. The food prices were high and taxes needed to be paid. Ultimately, 7 to 10 million people died. The Irish potato famine, 1845 to 1852. Potatoes were introduced by British landowners to Irish tenant farmers. Potatoes were how farmers made it through the winter. There was a fungal blight and half the crop was lost. To respond to the hunger, the British Crown lifted tariffs on corn and bread. But over the next 7 years, 75% of the potato crop was lost. Yet Britain kept importing whatever food it could find in Ireland, leaving the Irish to fend for themselves. Over those 7 years, 1 million Irish farming people died, and 1 to 2 million emigrated, cutting the population in half. Historians still argue whether the lack of response to this famine was malevolence or incompetence. You choose. Russia, 1924. You remember the Russian Revolution was in 1917. In 1924, Lenin died and was succeeded by Stalin, who, pre-revolution, funded the revolution through kidnappings, robberies, and protection rackets. Stalin's 5-year plan forced agricultural collectivization and rapid industrialization, creating a centralized command economy. It did not go well in Russia, but it went worse in Ukraine. Severe disruptions to food production contributed to the famine of 1930 to 33 that killed millions. The Ukrainians stubbornly resisted forced collectivization of their farms because it reminded them of serfdom. The more they resisted, the more taxes and grains Stalin took until there was nothing left to eat. Like now, people jammed into trains to leave the country. A Hungarian journalist reported begging peasants with swollen hands and feet, women holding up to the carriage windows what he called horrible infants with enormous wobbling heads and stick-like limbs and swollen bellies. Then Stalin forbade the Ukrainians from leaving Ukraine. In 3 months, May to July 1933, 2 million died. In total, deaths were between 4 and 7 million. Scholars can only estimate. Stalin forbade the recording of deaths, but people remembered. They told their children, wrote diaries, and locked them up in wooden boxes, buried or hidden under floors. Then, come 1940, the Nazis invaded Ukraine. By winter, they had requisitioned all the food, and there was another famine in Ukraine centered around Kyiv. Moving on to Leningrad, in June of 1941, Leningrad was surrounded and choked off by the Nazis. There was no access by rail or roads, only water access to food and fuel for 900 days. The Führer said that he would level the city by land and air with no possibility of negotiations for surrender. He would let the population of 3 million starve to death. 50,000 were killed by artillery and bombing. By the first winter, 600,000 had escaped, but starvation was claiming 100,000 lives a month of those remaining in the city. Children, the elderly, and the unemployed got 3 small slices of bread a day. Working adults were allotted 6 slices. 2,000 people were tried and convicted of cannibalism inside Leningrad. Ultimately, the siege of Leningrad killed 800,000 civilians in 900 days. North Korea. In the 1990s, North Korea's famine killed over 2 million people due to mismanagement of food and an inequitable political rationing policy. The UN surmises that from 2019 to 2021, 42% of North Koreans were malnourished. Today, there is evidence that a new famine is brewing in North Korea due to poor weather, a lack of fertilizer, and a poor harvest for several years. Small-scale private farming and trade seem to pull North Korea out of the previous famine, and those entities may do it again. The World Food Program has tripled its budget for North Korea for 2023 in case the government allows them to be helpful. Somalia. Somalia had a famine in 2011 after 2 years of drought. More than half of the 250,000 deaths occurred before a famine was even declared by the government. Al-Shabaab, an Islamist militant group, blocked relief supplies. Fast forward to 2023 in Somalia. 4 rainy seasons in a row have failed to materialize, an event not seen in 40 years. The war in Ukraine has caused the price of food to increase 49%. Now, more than 7 million people, nearly half the population, need urgent assistance for malnutrition. This is called an equalizer famine in a country that names famines. This means that even richer people have lost their animals and poorer people have lost their crops to the drought and are now at subsistence level or below. And again, Al-Shabaab is not letting humanitarian aid through. Sadly, terribly, There are many more heinous examples of man's inhumanity to man in the world's history that spring from both evil and incompetence. That brings me to Haiti, a country where I have volunteered for nearly 35 years. It's a small country that has had a famine alert for 2 years. Why? 70% of the food is imported. The roads and ports have been blocked by gangs, and food depots have been ransacked. The dueling gangs were created by dueling factions of elites who have taken turns running and emptying the coffers of the government for decades. Parts of Haiti today, while we sit here, are in what is considered by the UN Food and Agricultural Organization a catastrophic level of famine, level 5, code purple. That means 30% of children have acute malnutrition and are at imminent risk of death, and 20% of households have an extreme lack of food, and there are deaths every single day. 50% of Haiti is one level down from code purple, that is code red, level 4, emergency famine. Just a few years ago in the world and in Haiti, malnutrition had fallen to historic lows. Resolution of childhood malnutrition was within our reach. With the pandemic, however, malnutrition tripled globally, including in Haiti, due to supply chain problems, unemployment, inflation, and civil chaos. Every famine looks different. Some countries have cohesive, egalitarian systems that buffer early famine with sharing and local leadership directing resources from richer people to poorer people. But if the government uses starvation as a weapon of war against rebel citizens and prevents humanitarians from bringing food, there's little that can be done. History shows that the longer and deeper a famine lasts, the more the communal resilience tears apart. Parents sometimes abandon children, marauders steal for themselves whatever is not tacked down. In isolated areas, cannibalism of the already dead has been documented. We need mechanisms to hold conflict actors, policymakers, and humanitarian actors accountable for their decisions. So in 2005, the UN Security Council passed a resolution that made it a crime against humanity to deliberately create famine and mass starvation. In 2018, another UN Security Council resolution forbids starvation as a weapon of war. In 2019, this was amended to include non-international wars, i.e. civil wars. The International Criminal Court, the ICC in The Hague, prosecutes crimes against humanity. Although the UN bans the use of food or starvation as a weapon and considers it a war crime, it's incredibly hard to prove that food is intentionally being used as a weapon. While international resolutions offer a moral victory, seems to be a hollow victory in that it delivers little action to the millions of starving adults and their beloved children who are facing famine. Remember Alexan, the 7-year-old who showed up at a clinic in Haiti weighing only 29 pounds. He was lethargic. He had been so chronically protein deprived that he had no building blocks to produce melanin. The lack of protein caused his hair to be white and his skin very light in color. His temperature and blood sugar were below normal. He could neither sit nor stand. What chance did Alexan have for a life? We can treat Alexan's malnutrition, even though we may not yet be able to stop the extremists and the Stalins of the world. About 20 years ago, I realized that unless we address the underlying poverty that created the situation in which Alexan had nearly no food, there would be a never-ending stream of Alexans, dead, or with a permanently damaged vascular system and a lifetime propensity for diabetes and hypertension. In 2003, I founded Meds and Food for Kids, seeking therapeutic ways to help children out of the deep hole of malnutrition they had fallen into. Ordinary food cannot do it. A colleague at Washington University, Mark Maneri, had been working on a peanut-based concentrated nutritional supplement that has become the new gold standard for treatment of malnutrition in the world. He gave me the recipe. I found a hand grinder and we began to make and distribute this therapeutic food. Ultimately, Meds and Food for Kids, or MFK, built a factory in Haiti to produce at scale in order to distribute to people in need. Today, MFK is operating 2 shifts at the factory, producing life-changing results, not only for the 28 employees, but also for the farmers whose peanuts we purchase, and of course, the children whose lives we are able to save. And Alexon, 1 month after intense treatment with MFK's Metacomamba, he could walk, and the roots of his hairs were black. In 2 months, he weighed 35 pounds and had more color in his hair and skin. After 12 weeks of eating Metacomamba, he was completely transformed and able to run. A year later, he was the star of his new orphanage's soccer team. Today, MFK's products, manufactured in Haiti by Haitians, are distributed in 18 countries. Over 700,000 young children globally have been treated with MFK's Metacomamba. The efficacy of our product is so extraordinary that the government of Haiti adopted a new protocol for the treatment of malnutrition using the ready-to-use therapeutic food that we produce. The work to find, develop, and distribute a solution has been very, very hard. Every single day, there is a new crisis. We are a nonprofit, so we have a very small margin for error. We live and work in a risky area. Remember the man I met on the flight to Nepal, the one who advised me to avoid large organizations and to work with a mission-driven organization? He was prescient. Our product addressed malnutrition, the outcome of famine, but that is only one aspect of what the humanitarian response should be. In every historical famine I studied, the more well-off groups were more resilient and more likely to survive. In crowded places where refugees formally or informally gather, neglecting health interventions creates conditions for diarrhea, cholera, pneumonia, and measles. Neglecting water, sewage, and hygiene will ultimately kill more people than will lack of food. Humanitarians take this problem seriously and have worked hard to put in place systems to collect data and predict famines, and then warn governments and ship food and hygiene supplies to be distributed. Sadly, that is often where it stops. Every religion in the world admonishes its adherents to feed the hungry, yet almost every famine is started by, exacerbated by, or prolonged by humans seeking power, often in the name of God, seeking the assets currently controlled by others, or the extinction of another religious group. In 2023, we know the number of people in the world without enough food is nearly 800 million, 10% of the world's population. 45 million children are at risk of dying this year of malnutrition, some of the highest numbers ever recorded. Up until now, there has been sufficient food in the world, and it was a matter of money, logistics, and international will to get the calories to the places they were needed. This year, in 2023, the Norwegian International Development Minister predicts a global shortage of food for the first time ever due to the war in Ukraine, climate change, lack of fertilizer, and lack of investments in agricultural productivity. This has never happened in modern history. The technology and logistical problems are being seriously addressed. Sustainable agricultural productivity must be addressed immediately, and we must rally support on behalf of the additional and existential challenge of climate change. Despite undeniably loving our children, we are not preserving or creating a world that will work for them, because it takes our sacrifice and discipline today to make tomorrow better. Climate change exacerbates all that we have discussed, but is barely being talked about. We cannot wait for the conflicts that are inevitable as people migrate from drought and heat to water resources and available land. They will not be met with open arms. I've recently been to an area in the northern states where requests from Arizona to pipe water to Lake Superior have been met with hardened negative attitudes about golf courses and lawns in the desert. Up until now, famines have been created more by human and political factors than by weather phenomena. But now climate change is taking center stage without our consent. Global food is dependent on a few crops, a few companies, and a few countries. The World Food Program is up against a 30% increase in the cost of the food they buy to respond to famine. Politicians are failing to prevent wars and very slow to adequately respond to the climate challenge. It's up to me and you to change that for our children and grandchildren. It's our turn to do it right. To quote the famed anthropologist of the 20th century, Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you for that talk. For those of you who are in the audience, if you have questions for Dr. Wolf, please put them in the Q&A feature, which I'll be monitoring, and I'm happy to relay those questions on. While we wait for those to come in, I have a couple that came up, and I think they're really relevant to those to your story. So you saw a problem, saw one potential solution, kind of got guided in a different direction, and then sort of founded your own organization instead of going and working for a bigger, more bureaucratic, slower moving organization. So kind of the trade-off of that is if you're with a smaller organization, you typically have fewer resources. You may not have all the connections that the bigger organizations that are already established have. So how do you develop connections and operate in an environment that's really unstable like Haiti? For those who don't know, the Haitian president was assassinated by a criminal gang, I believe last year or late the year before. This is not the first sort of major episode of political unrest in Haiti. So how do you go about forming the connections that you need in that kind of an environment to make sure that you're going to be able to operate and make a difference?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, it's there's a spot for everybody, right? So you have to first you have to see that you can figure out how to make this stuff and deliver it to people. And then once you have results, then you engage the Haitian Ministry of Health in your local area. Then you engage the countrywide Haitian Ministry of Health, and you meet with all the big actors too in the country, because they're there. All of these big global entities are there, and they actually need your product as well, because they don't make anything, they distribute things and they have money. So you make partnerships everywhere with all the big organizations, with 200 mission groups who have medical clinics or schools, or are providing some sort of relief and trying to build resilience in the Haitian people, because they basically had on the very best of times, the government of Haiti has been AWOL, and which makes it kind of the Wild West for people like us, where nobody's paying any attention and there's no regulation and you could do whatever you wanted. But the downside of that is, everything that gets done in the country gets done by somebody, not the government, right? And so until this most recent last 2-3 years, when the violence has gotten so bad in Port-au-Prince, there's been a lot of people doing a lot of things everywhere in Haiti. And as a witness to Haiti in the last 35 years, I would say that Haiti is much more affluent today than it was 35 years ago. It's a much more well put together country in terms of there's more educated people, there's more roads, there's cell phones. They skipped the whole landline thing because that, was very few people had landlines. Cell phones have made a huge difference. And I would say, a lot of people are critical of the UN presence in Haiti from 2004 to 2017. But what I saw was that it provided enough stability that a lot of development could happen, because you could reliably get from point A to point B without being stopped by, some entrepreneur who decided to block the road with a gun. And you know, it's not simple to do development anywhere, and there's room for everybody to do their part. And as you point out, although we're small but mighty, we are small, and we make and among the manufacturers of ready-to-use therapeutic food in the world, we are the smallest, right? But we're there. We're right on where we are in Haiti, and we are making malnutrition treatment for Haiti as fast as we can. And it's being bought by UNICEF and distributed as fast as they can do it.
Great, thank you. So we have a question from the audience, or a couple of questions from one of the audience members. What exactly needs to be done to mitigate the malnutrition situation in Haiti on a national level?
Well, malnutrition's kind of like, you know, the failure of the system. And so that's why I founded Meds and Food for Kids, a social enterprise. So we could, I mean, the kids are malnourished because their parents don't have any money for food. And they don't have any money for food because they don't have a job. And there's no jobs because there's not enough economic activity in the country. So, you know, the real solution to malnutrition is employment and economic development, right? And I think that Haiti has to become a country that people want to invest in, and people feel safe in bringing their businesses to. And that has not happened because it's been run by short-sighted people who basically were predatory and took whatever they could for themselves and didn't think about the common good. What I've always said is Haiti needs its own Nelson Mandela, somebody who's really interested in the common good.
Do you think it's possible to totally eradicate malnutrition in Haiti?
Yes. I mean, we had 3 years ago, we had decreased malnutrition by 50% in Haiti. We could see the light at the end of the tunnel, but then the pandemic and civil disturbances and life happened, right?
Yeah.
So, but we could have, and it would have been slow. The last 50% wouldn't have been as quick as the first 50%, right? It would have taken a long time, and it would have been slow economic development. But every country needs smart, healthy children to grow up into smart, healthy adults, right? And so, the more smart, healthy children you have, the more likely it is you can figure out your problems and create a functional society.
That's spot on. So one last question from Frito. How do you plan to continue to distribute ready-to-use therapeutic foods in Haiti, given the current unrest and the pandemic and everything else that's going on in the world?
Well, you know what? One of the things about Haitian people is not only are they resilient, but they're really good problem solvers. And so we produce it and we distribute it in our neighborhood, basically, because we're in the north. We're not where, St. Louis is to Chicago as Cap Haitian is to Port-au-Prince, right? I mean, there could be terrible riots in Chicago, but we might know about them, but they don't affect us here. Same thing in Haiti. There's terrible things going on in Port-au-Prince, but we're not affected by them in the north in Cap Haitian. And so we're running 2 shifts. Our people show up to work every day. We're making product, and we are, by hook or by crook, sending this with few exceptions to areas around the country where it is distributed, not by us, but by UNICEF and the Ministry of Health and partners that they have. And this, the deep pockets of UNICEF, again, your point about big organizations, allow them to hire a lot of security. And so, gangsters, criminals are cowards, basically. They're just going to go after people with no guns and no resistance, right? They're not going to put themselves in harm's way. So if you have security, you can get through, and people, and they're brave, and they're doing it on behalf of people, not their own children, but other people's children.
Thank you for that response. So you mentioned that your production facilities are located in the north of Haiti. Is Meds and Food for Kids the only manufacturer of ready-to-use therapeutic foods that is actually based in a country in which malnutrition is endemic, or is that a pretty typical setup to produce locally and manufacture locally?
Well, there's something called the Plumpy Field Network. So we are part of the Plumpy Field Network, and the Plumpy Field Network was founded by Nutricet in France, which is the biggest maker of ready-to-use therapeutic food, in order to partner with and help and support the production facilities in the program countries where the malnourished kids live. So there's 16 members of this, and they're in Africa, they're in Asia, and they're in Haiti. And each of them is in a program country. But each of them is a for-profit company and has other products that they make, in contrast to Meds and Food for Kids. Because we didn't have any money, we needed to become a charity at the very beginning, and we wanted to give away food, and so we needed to be a charity. But we use the principles of business to run our factory in a sustainable way. But we are the smallest of the manufacturers in the world, and we probably have the most trouble of anybody. But we persist, and we are successful, really, because we're working with Haiti and Haitians, and they don't really have too many options. A lot of them would like to emigrate, but nobody really wants to let them in, and so they have to figure it out, and they have a long history of figuring it out, and we that works to our advantage, really.
So you mentioned working in Haiti and working with Haitians. In an earlier answer to one of my questions, you said that you kind of start with your local health official there in Haiti, and then you get to the bigger and the bigger and the bigger before you're working with like the National Minister of Health and the other major players that are out there. It seems to me that community buy-in would be really important. So how do you start to develop community buy-in? How do you not just be seen as sort of an outside interloper or a white knight coming in, but really get the community to buy in and believe in what you're doing? How important is that, and how do you go about developing that?
Well, it's all very organic, because when we started, it was me in a clinic handing out little yogurt containers of Metacomamba that I had brought, the yogurt containers I brought from home, and for the hand grinder. But we're from the very beginning, we hired Haitians, and they were the heart and soul of our organization. They were making all the Metacomamba. They were our people on the ground. And then our protocol for treating malnutrition is in Creole and French, and we always had a nurse, a Haitian nurse, who actually interfaced with the mothers and the children, and offered them this product, which somebody somewhere was paying for, but that didn't matter really to, I don't think, the mothers and the children. They were happy that it was somebody somewhere was paying for it, but it was given to them in a local clinic by a Haitian nurse, and who followed them, cared for them, and their children were miraculously cured, whereas previously they had died, and they had given them up for dead as they got more and more malnourished. So it was really a miracle that occurred just before our eyes, all of our eyes, really. And everybody was really, really, everybody in the whole food chain of power was really, really bought into it. So, and then, as we moved 5 times and we had one little place after another with certain problems, whatever, we finally, in 2012 had collected enough money to build a real factory. And then that we employed people. So the community, we're kind of in an exurbative capation called Catamaran, and we really employ a lot of people. We employ 88 people. Well, that gives us a lot of street cred in the local community. And I think the main mistaken belief is that the community might have about Meds and Food for Kids is that it's a rich organization and that we're like USAID or Save the Children or World Food Program or something. That we're not. We really aren't. But we've done a lot of things with a huge number of volunteer helpers and engineers and lots of donors and the help of our Haitian workers. So I think we are alive today because we do have street cred and we are very integrated into the community. And we've just installed solar because we were making too much noise for our neighbors with our diesel, and it was very hard to get and it was very expensive, and it's the right way to go. So we found a lot of very, very generous people, and we ran a capital campaign to install solar. And on Tuesday of this week, today's Thursday, on Tuesday of this week, we flipped the switch and we entirely powered our production in our factory with solar. So we have, with the help of many, many people, harnessed the sun for Haiti.
That's fantastic. Congratulations on that. This is, you mentioned a 20-year journey that continues on. It's clearly been a very successful, if not challenging, journey. Could you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you've faced and the problems that you've had to overcome? You mentioned going sort of from building to building before you could set up, a real manufacturing center, a real factory that could employ people. What were some things that you had to overcome, and how did you go about doing it?
Well, there's a lot of them. I mean, some of them are a little bit more colorful than others. So we discovered early on that the peanuts that we wanted to buy from local people were contaminated with aflatoxin. And aflatoxin was a problem in the United States, even in peanuts and peanut butter, even in the 1980s. As a pediatrician, we said to people, do not feed your kids peanut butter. It's too much aflatoxin. Well, there's a lot more affluence in the United States, so the peanut butter industry right away solved this problem with more sorting and more testing and whatever. So when we discovered the same problem, unsurprisingly, in Haiti, we had to do more sorting and more testing, but we were not experts in this. And so, really, I'm not an expert in anything except pediatrics, but I know people, and or I got to know people. I know there's experts out there. So we got peanut experts from the University of Georgia to help us and figure this out. And University of Cornell, a toxicologist, came to Haiti, and he said, well, I've got this little test. It's kind of like a pregnancy test, but we need some 70% ethanol. So we bought some gin downtown. We could only get one bottle of it because there wasn't any more. So then we went around to all the stills, the local people who are making hooch, basically, and who claimed that they had, a certain percentage of alcohol. But turns out that you can if the alcohol that you bought at the still turns on fire, you can use it in this test, right? So we're lighting all these different so first we gather together 15 kinds of alcohol from 15 different places, and then we see which ones light on fire, and then we are able to run our test on batches of peanuts, because you can sort out a lot of the aflatoxin by visually looking at it, but you can't sort it all out. And so we had to do testing over and over and over again to be able to use local peanuts in our products and not cause problems, because what the health problems that aflatoxin causes are in children, keeps you from absorbing protein, and in adults after 30 years of exposure is the most common cause of liver cancer in the world. And this problem is ubiquitous everywhere, and it's only under control in highly developed nations. So this has been an ongoing saga for us to be able to help peanut farmers make a living growing peanuts that we can buy and put into our products that are low in aflatoxin. So that's just one example of, problems that in America, you could snap your fingers and get low aflatoxin peanuts tomorrow.
Thank you. That was a great answer and a really good anecdote. So, you mentioned that some of the many of the famines you had looked at, if not all of them, had a man-made political element to it. As a political scientist, that's not entirely surprising to me, but it's also an area that I find fascinating. So I'm wondering, you might not want to get too specific about Haiti, but I guess in general, what is one of the most harmful or most challenging sorts of policies that you've had to basically either change somebody's mind at a policy-making level, at a political level, or had to overcome or find a workaround or something else like that?
Well, I think it's aflatoxin again, because we had all these heavy hitters, from University of Georgia, University of Florida, Laval University in Montreal. They put a lot of time and effort into trying to get the government of Haiti to set an aflatoxin standard that every food manufacturer had to meet. And it failed. The government was resistant to aggravating the market ladies, is what they said. I mean, the market ladies don't know from aflatoxin, and they want to sell whatever peanuts they want to sell, and they don't want to have to worry about the common good. So I would say trying to get any kind of food safety regulation in the whole country has been an uphill battle. I mean, we have passed numerous international food safety audits. We're required to, but we're the only one. We're required because we belong to this, because we sell to UNICEF and we belong to this international consortium. But other food manufacturers in Haiti don't have any regulations to comply with. And so sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And this makes for not a good public health situation for the people of Haiti. I mean, countries need food safety regulations. There are none in Haiti, and there's no will to make them because, why would you want to aggravate a constituency? And so I think that's really it's a major disappointment. We came so close, and all these resources and meetings and years, and then nada. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's a common good issue. Somebody has to start thinking about the common good.
I completely hear that. So question from the audience, from Marie Kenyon. How can people support your work? What are the best ways for people to get involved?
Well, Marie Kenyon has been a great help to us. Thank you, Marie. So whenever we call, everybody says yes. That's great. That's been a great help to us. And then, of course, money. Everything you can do everything with money. And so we have a website, www.mfkhaiti.org. where you can donate. And that's really supports our work. It allows us to donate, to buy from ourselves and to donate. But in the meantime, it gives work to all of those 88 employees and thousands of Haitian peanut farmers who have changed their ways. I'm happy to report. And, when we first started testing, aflatoxin in the United States is set at a level of 20 parts per billion. When we first started randomly checking, we would see 300 to 3,000 in the market peanuts in Haiti. So of course we couldn't use them. But now if you go to those same markets, you rarely get even 100. Usually it's like 30 or below, which means that what the education that we've given the farmers about how they can change their ways and lower the aflatoxin in their peanuts, and therefore we can buy them, has spread far and wide beyond the farmers that we've touched to everybody everywhere. And the whole society is now exposed to much less aflatoxin than they had been before. So again, these farmer programs need support, and we need the donations of generous people to help us do that.
Great, thank you. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. I have one, and I'll give the audience time to come up with another one. But this one I think is good to sort of move us into closing. Or at least send us a little bit in that direction. I cannot imagine the things that you have witnessed or seen or come across repetitively. I'm a human rights scholar, and a big part of my job is to read reports of people being tortured or abused or disappeared or otherwise neglected by their government. And this is very much a similar thing to what you're doing, although you're seeing it in person. So how do you maintain hope? How do you keep perspective? And how do you sort of take care of yourself and your employees in terms of sort of your mental well-being and staying grounded and positive?
Well, I take a lot of my cues from the Haitian people. When I go there, I always have an escape hatch, right? I could get on an airplane, come back to the St. Louis tomorrow if I needed to. Well, maybe not tomorrow, but in a couple of days. And so, but they've made really good, happy lives out of very few material, very little material wealth. And they are an inspiration to me, really. And also, of course, there is the starfish story. So the little girl is on the beach, the tide came in and then went out and stranded all these starfish on the beach. And she's throwing them back into the water one by one. And a man comes up behind her and says, "Whoa, little girl, why are you even bothering? You'll never get all these starfish back in the ocean." And she says, "It matters to this starfish. And it matters to this starfish."
I think that's great. That's definitely sort of a parable that I try to keep in mind as well. An anonymous attendee has asked, how much does it cost to save the life of a malnourished child?
$72. It's pretty cheap.
That's remarkably cheap. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think that is all the questions. We've got one that's a little bit more technical about getting a copy of the talk. I'm going to put this in the Q&A, link in the Q&A as well. But all of the Great Decisions speaker series, including this one, are recorded and posted on the UMSL Global website, which is you can find it youtube.com/@UMSL Global. And that is out there in the chat now. So if you are interested in that, feel free to go back. You can watch this recording and any of the previous Great Decisions speaker series you may have missed. With that, I'll bring it to a close. Dr. Wolf, thank you so much. I will give you an opportunity for the last word before I come back on and do our normal plug for the next event. Anything that you would like to leave us with, closing thoughts, anything else like that?
No, I don't think so. I really appreciate the opportunity to present here today, and your very interesting and interested questions. And I just think that all of what we talked about today is urgent for all of us to protect our next generation of children. I mean, we have different work to do in America than the Haitians do. We don't have malnourished kids in before us, but we have the future that is of climate challenges that we really have to address today. And for this, I'll be dead, but most of you will not be dead. And certainly my children and my grandchildren will be having to deal with a world that they would not have wished for themselves unless we get busy today.
Thank you for closing with a call to action. It's something that I always appreciate. Want to thank you once again, Dr. Wolf, for being here. This has been a really great talk. Really enjoyed the conversation and really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. Again, these quality programs can only happen because of the support of the membership, the members of the World Affairs Council of St. Louis. Please consider becoming a member today. Again, if you don't want to pay for membership, try to shoehorn your organization to pay for an organizational membership. That's another way of doing it. There are multiple different membership options. Please explore those at the link in the chat box. Our next Great Decisions event will be on war crimes, relevant to what we've talked about some today, on April 13th at the same time. Please look for that link as well. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you all again for being here, for your participation, for your questions. And Dr. Wolf, one final thank you for your enlightening conversation.
Thank you.